We are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Superbia Cinema. For those of you who don't know, Superbia is the year-round arts and culture programme from Manchester Pride. So that means we curate, we fund, we support, we promote and we mentor LGBTQ artists across Greater Manchester to help support them to make the work they want to make. And we do that all year round, so we're very lucky. Normally we'd have a weekend of free arts and culture events at August Bank Holiday. Today we have just the Superbia Sunday, but it's jam-packed with stuff. We've got an online gallery, and we have 4 incredible artists in conversations, which will be live on our YouTube by now. And this is the Superbia Cinema, so hopefully our audiences will just have watched a series of really exceptional LGBTQ short films. And I'm really excited to welcome some of those filmmakers with us. And the films you will have seen are Sadé Mica's Binders, Joe Ingham's Baby Lies Truthfully, Invisible Women, which was directed by Alice Smith and produced by Joe Ingham, and Crypsis, which was directed by Christopher McGill and produced by Siobhan and Fahey. And we're going to have a chance to talk about those films, but like dig into a little bit of the filmmakers' other works as well, if we've got time. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. It's really lovely to be connected across our maybe 5 different cities or 4 different cities. Really appreciate you.
3 different countries.
Yeah, of course. We're international Superbia Cinema. And I always say that I think short film is a genre that queer artists really excel in. And I think as a form, it's a place that our stories really seem to flourish. And I think the selection of films today is just brilliant proof of that theory. So I'm going to chat to each of you about your films, and I'll also open up the chat to everyone here so we can kind of reflect and ask questions, because it's kind of rare to get such a diverse bunch of talented filmmakers in one space. So I'm going to start, Sadé, with your piece, if that's okay. So Sadé and I have a delayed but inevitable project together that we're going to be staging a show of their work at Paper Gallery in Manchester, and obviously it's been delayed. Paper is a tiny space, so that's the thing that we're looking forward to. But I've been lucky enough to spend time with Sadé and write an article about their practice, and the piece that we saw today was a commission for the Trans Vegas Arts Festival. So I just want to thank Trans Creative for sharing that work with us. And it's just been lovely to see some of your work and to stay connected with you in the meantime, Sadé. And what I love about your work, and this film included in that, is that there's kind of no edges to it. You really invite the audience in. You tell us what you do and don't know in the moment. You don't tell us what to feel. You're very gentle in your explanations, and the work kind of flourishes because of that. And that's what I really take from your work.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Can you talk to us about the film, the commission, and the subject matter? Because it's a hidden thing that you've made visible in a really lovely way, I think.
Yeah. So Binders, the film, was just all about my current kind of practice, my art practice, making binders. I started making them in 2018, I think, November. I wanted to buy a binder. If anyone, I guess, I'm assuming that everybody watching this would know what a binder is, but if not, it's a garment that a lot of trans masc people use to compress their breasts to make an appearance of a flat chest, typically worn under clothes. And I'd never tried one, never bought one, but I really wanted to. But I also was like very conscious of the fact, I talk about this in the film, so I'm just kind of regurgitating, but conscious of the fact that I've got a large chest, and so a binder wouldn't have kind of given me the desired effect, so to speak, of a flat chest. But I still wanted to experiment. And so I figured this was like the perfect kind of catalyst for my art practice. So I started making them from different materials, firstly starting with canvas, which was a nice nod to being an art student. And then I started using denim, using not perspex, vinyl. Perspex would be a bit hard. Using vinyl, pleather, making like puffer jacket type material ones. And they kind of became as you said, like an outerwear garment. I kind of rejected this idea of stealth and presenting the trans form in a way that kind of eschews the fact that we are trans, trying to appeal to some sort of like cis gaze and cis understanding of what we should present like, because I'm non-binary and I try not to uphold any kind of gender norms and stuff in my presentation. I figured that celebrating the body rather than trying to fit into this kind of neat narrative was my aim with the binders. So yeah, they became like a style piece. They became something to be worn outside, something to interrogate. Some of them have text on it, so people have to look closely at them and read them, which kind of defeats the purpose of people not looking at your chest or making your chest something that is hidden, which was nice. It's helped me become more at one with my body, helped me have less kind of insecurity surrounding my chest. And yeah, I guess that's where the binders film came from.
Yeah,
was just talking about all of that and kind of explaining the process, because a lot of people see the binders and don't know what they mean. They just think they're like nice vests, which is fine. But it's nice.
I think your film has that perfect mixture of show and tell.
Yeah,
so if people are just coming into that world, it's a brilliant kind of visual lesson. And you have film as part of your practice anyway, and in that film people will see you kind of in natural settings doing kind of elaborate physical poses. Can you tell us a bit about that element?
So the posing started again from kind of interrogating gendered expression and performance. So I was interested in how posture itself is kind of gendered, and how I felt very aware of how I postured myself in everyday life, and how certain stances could be considered masculine and feminine. And I made a film when I was in university, where I copied the poses of life drawing subjects, and I looked at male and female kind of poses, so to speak, and wanted to kind of do them both to kind of blur the lines between this expectation of a gendered posture. And then I don't know when, I think July or something last year, I started kind of exploring the countryside, and I was just compelled. Like, I was in Edale to do these poses. That was like the only thing I could think of doing when I was filming myself, and so from there it's just been a continual thing. I go out into the countryside, or in quarantine I've been in my own countryside in Moston, which is just crusty brooks around the corner, and do these poses and push my body physically and mentally to kind of observe it and be at one with it, and also just kind of be at one with nature, which has been nice. Yeah,
it's such a brilliant, unique mix, like binders, the natural settings, the film. I just like, it doesn't remind me of anything, and that's really rare in art and in film as well. Does anyone else want to chip in, talk about Sadé's work, or maybe I have some questions for them? No pressure.
Yeah, I just would like to say, I enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. The really nice shots, really nice pacing, and I like what you're saying there about this visibility, and it's quite celebratory. So, yeah, I really like that.
Yeah, that's what I like about it, making like the invisible visible, but completely on the artist's terms. That's kind of really, it's almost like a loving gesture, because I think so much of like queer and trans life especially is meant to happen behind the scenes. We're not meant to say like, how we look after our bodies, how we have sex, how we change our bodies, how we stay well. It's all kind of like sequestered in some ways, and this isn't. It's the opposite. It's like, you know, it's like runway sometimes. I just think it's brilliant. Such a brilliant twist. Thanks for that, Sadé, and thanks for being part of Superbia Cinema as well.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So we're going to talk next about Baby Lies Truthfully.
Can I ask a question before?
Yeah, please go.
Well, there was lots I liked about it. One question I was wondering is how you filmed it, because there was you posing, but somebody else was holding the camera, so I wondered about that.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah, go on.
Sorry. I was just going to say, sometimes I have people with me, but most of the time it's just me with my tripod. I have made the films as well with other people. I made one with my mum doing the posturing, which was nice, and taught her to do it, so we did it in tandem. And we had like quite a few people watching. I was like, what the hell's going on? But yeah, so most of the time it's just me with my tripod in the countryside or on my car.
That is lovely. And I think it's an interesting thing that it was a lockdown film, because there's I've made one, Chris has made one, and there's going to be a little selection of films that have been made. So yeah, it is an interesting. And it is being able to film yourself using a tripod like that gives you incredible independence. And so you edited it.
Yeah, I edited it. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of lovely editing.
Yeah, and I love the fact that it's a performance when it happens, but for us, it's a film. So there's people who've seen it live that we will experience. But it lives
one of the films where I'm in the water, it was on New Year's Day, and I'd gone there, I had a deadline, and I was like, I need to get it done. No one will be there, it's fine. And then I went there, and there were literally like 40 people at this waterfall watching me, and I was like, oh god. But I was like, I need to get it done, and everyone's just like walking the dogs, like, and it was freezing as well. And I'm in the water and just looking like a weirdo, but it's nice. Yeah. It's fine.
And what gives you that little impetus, like to keep going with it? Because like a more shy person would be like, okay, today's not the day, but you went there with a purpose and you just saw it through.
I'd driven far, and also I had a deadline, but also just because I'm like, I don't know, it is what it is. Like, I have to do it. This is my piece, and also the performance aspect of it is part of it. So
yeah,
if I'm introducing someone to something weird, even if they never get the context for it, they just like go home like someone was in the waterfall, like stretching, doing yoga, like that's fine by me.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll come across my film one day, which would be nice.
And with all the pieces are falling to place. I love it. I thought you were going to say because I'm driven, but you were like, no,
I'm not wasting my petrol.
But it's really bold, and you can sense that when you're watching it, is that you're just like, look, I'm really free. There might be 50 people off camera, or there might be no one, and it's not going to affect.
We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. That's part of the magic, isn't it? Really.
And because they're so quiet as well, like it is nice. And like that one as well, like a dog had run in the shot, and I was like, get out.
There'll be a blooper reel somewhere someday that we might get.
There is.
I wanted to say that I adored it. I thought it was. I thought it was. I think its beauty lied at sort of, its beauty was in its simplicity, in a sense. It was so devastatingly delivered, and I thought I really loved the mix of the graphic and the Photoshop and the artwork as well onto the footage, because I think it really connoted your practice as an artist as a whole, and I thought you know, for in such a relatively short period of time in that film, you made some incredibly important and really thought-provoking points that I'm still thinking about now. So I think it's a really devastating, and I mean that in the best possible way, devastatingly powerful piece of work. It's brilliant.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe. And I know what you mean about like the window into your practice, Sadé, because I really felt like, oh, I know what your world looks like. And I felt like it's a place that you are really in charge of, and that was like, oh yeah, I get it. And that's so rare, because it was like you say, it was like transparent, even though the content is quite complex, and that's hard to get right. Yeah, thanks for that. That was brilliant.
Thank you.
So we're going to bounce back to you for Baby Lies Truthfully, which, I mean, I love. because it.
We all love.
Yeah,
we all love.
Yeah.
We all love it. We all love it. We all love it.
Because it, firstly, just because I'm so in love with like archival footage, and especially like a patchwork collage approach to it. I get very emotional with those visuals anyway. But also, I have an art practice that's kind of rooted in like HIV and AIDS activism and artists. And David, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, Robillard?
There's many different ways. Robillard is what I tend to plumb for.
It was a name that had passed my eyes years ago, and I knew so little about him. And now I'm just like, want to know more. So I guess we can start there. How did you first hear about this poet, this artist, and what was the impetus to turn that knowledge into a film for you?
I think I first came across him in the bargain booklet of the ICA. They were which is where one of my favorite haunts. But they were throwing out all these books or giving them away, and in it was one of his volumes, and this was about 5, 6, 7 years ago, and I picked it up and I remember reading it. I remember reading the verse and I thought, oh, this must be new, this must be a new and emerging queer poet, and then when I looked at it, it had been published in 1987. I thought, my God, that's incredible, that something so raw and arresting could be made 30 years ago. And then I thought, oh well, who is this guy? I'm sure he's gone on to great things, and of course he was dead within the year of this publication. So I really sort of became a bit obsessed with him in a way. I really wanted to know more, and there's so little out there about him. I think it's interesting because at the moment we're seeing a huge revival and revision of artists who are lost to AIDS. There's been a big Keith Haring documentary which the BBC did, and people like Robert Mapplethorpe are getting lots of retrospectives and all that kind of thing.
Sure.
But there's been nothing really on David, and he was a true visionary, and still is. And so I'd always wanted to do something, and then it was only when I had an edit which finished in March, and then of course the current situation happened, and I thought, oh well, maybe now's the time to do something. So that's how it came about.
Well, I mean, I love how you talk about that discovery, because I remember a similar thing happening with like listening to Arthur Russell for the first time and thinking, wow, this is incredible. Who is this? Because it sounded so contemporary to me, and then only to discover that he'd been gone for a long, long time. So there's a weird element of like kind of hauntology when we deal with, artists who have been lost to AIDS. But also what I love about David's writing is it's really irreverent. It's like gallows humor. It's very camp. It's very knife edge, and actually we haven't kept that from the history of like artists with AIDS. We've kept the kind of the very kind of reverent and militant approach, but we haven't kept the playfulness, and we haven't kept the the bit to me that's really queer actually is some of what we've lost, because we're so cautious to be respectful that we've lost some of that element, and it's there so strongly in David's words. It's a very queer thing to me watching it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's when he got his diagnosis. This is an anecdote from Gilbert and George, who were his, they helped and supported him a lot. But apparently when he did get his diagnosis, he still had shows to do and started introducing himself to these sort of art critics and buyers as David Robillades, and, and sort of selling himself on that. And, these people are sort of, oh my God. Yeah. But I agree with you. He sort of sits on the knife point of comedy and tragedy. And actually the only, I agree with you about not many, we don't really remember that sort of thing because we're so reverent and so whatever. But one of the people, and I'm so glad he's seen it and he likes it, one of the people that reminded me of so much was David Hoyle and his humor and his approach to to being a gay man. So
yeah, absolutely. And I remember anecdotally that when David's stage show included his HIV test and him getting his results and everything, and that was considered so scandalous. But now the narrative is very much about be open about testing and be open about, and it's like the queer art precedes the rest of the conversation as usual. I'd love to bring the rest of you in about Baby Lies Truthfully. What did you think and what did you feel?
Siobhan, do you want to go first, or sorry, Sadé?
Yeah. You go first.
Okay, yeah, I loved it. Was obviously very humorous, very witty, good use of raunchy pornography there. But I think, walks the line so perfectly, like it's seamless. You've got the tension of these kind of pornographic shots, but it just works so seamlessly with the story, and that kind of poignant ending that's a bit of a sucker punch. It just leaves you feeling, you really feel it after watching it, a good few minutes afterwards. You're like, wow, it really hits you. But yeah, very thought-provoking, and yeah, I loved it. It was really good.
Thanks. Anyone else want to chip in?
What led you to this? I mean, you already talked about, the subject and how you kind of found him, but like what made you feel connected to his story so poignantly? Did you see parallels in between your own life and your own experiences, or?
I did, and I still do, and I think he, I think he's very. I was just very struck by his words, and I do relate to his experience a hell of a lot. I relate to his experience a lot as a the sort of the meat market aspects of the gay scene. I think are something that he was very good at describing, and I think that still exists today. It might not exist in the same bars and clubs that he went to, but if you go on any of the apps, it's still particularly when it's able-bodied white cis gay men, they're very fascist in who they believe it makes the cut. And so he was very onto that very early on, and I really identified with that. Not that I'm a fascist.
I like what you said as well, Greg, about like the queer scene being ahead of the game with the thing. Like, it's nice to see that. It's nice to also hear about people from not now, like from back in the day. I mean, I'm 25, but I feel like I'm so kind of divorced from queer history sometimes to see this film, and also Invisible Women as well. Like, I just enjoy hearing all these perspectives that I am so kind of divorced from. And because we're in this like social media bubble and things like that, I feel like we're just very aware of like young people's stories. So it's really nice to hear that. And also to see you make a film about somebody else, because I focus entirely on myself. So it's like strange for me to see somebody look at another subject for their.
Well, I love that idea about the film is doing that work, like filling in our narratives for generations, and of course, like your work, Sadé, will be that for someone else in the future.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Like that. Yeah, I mean that's a really nice kind of legacy, and actually, it's a kind of good segue into Invisible Women, because I think of all people's stories, like lesbian history is the first to kind of fall off the page. And like film and documentary is such a brilliant way to fight against that. And there's two bits in Invisible Women that always really touch me, and both near to the beginning, where she goes to the library. It's Lucia goes to the library, isn't it? Basically to say, does anyone remember me? That's the essence of those questions. Like, is there anything about the women's movement in Manchester? Is there anything about the work that we did? And to be met with no, and then the film is off then, because the film does that work, and that's the thrill of that piece for me. But I'm shocked, because I'm such a swot about LGBT history, that Angela and Lucia's story has never you know, come to me through the community. But if you do ask, you know, older Manchester LGBT people, they will go, oh yeah, yes, I have a story, and that's all in one place in the film. How did you find Angela and Lucia, or how did they find you? And I know you worked with Alice on the directed.
Yes,
so.
Alice. Yeah, I didn't. Alice Smith directed Invisible Women, and obviously did a brilliant job with it. But I came across them. I was making a series for the BBC in 2017, and it was called the People's History of LGBTQ Britain, and the series was exploring LGBTQ life in Britain since '67 through to now, and '67 is when homosexuality was part decriminalised between two men over the age of 21 in private. So it was a bit and when the BBC, we were talking to them about the series, they said, well, it's all just going to be men, isn't it? Because the law never pertained to women. And I sort of had an exception to this, because when you look at the people who fought, you know, on the Wolfenden Committee 10 years prior to get the law made, and when you looked at who was involved with the Gay Liberation Front, there were loads of women, there were loads of transgender people, there were loads of transsexual people, there were loads of lesbians, you know, I didn't quite understand the logic, and they said, okay, well, we'll probably, you know, if you find some extraordinary women, we might include them. And I thought, okay, well, okay, I'll go for this then. And I found a blog about radical music in the Northwest, and Lucia was mentioned in it. And they said Lucia was a member of the GLF in Manchester. Now, I get really sort of, this is a thing of mine, but I really, really love the fact that the GLF has had this sort of resurgence in popular opinion and popular knowledge over the last few years. However, I do have an issue with the fact that it is only ever mentioned in London. It's only and I know lots of the older men who were involved with London GLF, and they are sick of it as well. So to find Lucia, and to find that at the same time the very nice university educated men in London were starting the GLF, up in Manchester there were two working class women starting it in a pub, which is just brilliant. And I thought, well, why doesn't anyone know who they are? Why, you know, why has no one asked them their story? And they did appear in the series, but they appeared in the series for all of 2 minutes, and it was mainly Susan Calman crying with them. So I thought, okay, well, why don't we do something else and tell their story a bit longer? And that's how Invisible Women came about.
Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic. And there is something super Mancunian about it, because like they're both Irish, and like Manchester is an Irish city, and it's like I love that the first conversation, and she says, you know, what's liberation, what's the front? Like she's learning from the ground up, and then she's like, okay, well, that's what we need to do. How do we get there? And that's like the fine point of activism. It's brilliant. And yeah, whenever I watch it, it's like the first time again, because that thrill. But I also I was getting really excited then when you talked about following that first trail, like what's this name? Who was she? What did she do? And suddenly opening up into, well, you asked for extraordinary women, and now we've found them. That's like such a thrill. That must be a thrill for a filmmaker to suddenly cotton onto that, you know, that story, and to be able to follow it through. That's a buzz for an artist, I bet.
It is, and it's. I'm doing other stuff at the minute, and it's very much like I sort of find myself more and more sort of becoming like a police detective, and sort of having to sort of dig and find these and find people who, in the case of these new things, really don't want to talk, and trying to find them and trying to convince them of the value of recording their history is a big challenge. Yeah,
sure. Who wants to jump in about this incredible film, Invisible Women? I know it's a favourite of yours, Siobhan. Go ahead.
I love both films a lot. I love the way both films are about archive. I mean, the first film is so harsh on the generation gap between men, which obviously goes on still, but yeah, it's so painful, really. Invisible Woman is one of my favourite films, and I had a funny year when I had a film out that was chasing invisible women around the festivals, and it was in a really difficult position because I was always up against invisible women, and I always wanted invisible women to win. Although my film, obviously, but I still wanted invisible women to win. And I looked at it so many times, but it's one of those films where the characters literally walk off the page, because at most screenings you meet them, and you know,
yes,
the audience, everybody, you know, they're like so nonchalant, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Drink, you know, they're so
they're brilliant. They
great.
did, yeah, they did this thing. I have to say, we did this screening at the Angela and Lucia are absolutely incredible, and that they have done that, you know, they're both women in their, you know, 70s. I'm sure they won't mind me saying this, and they have done nearly 50 screenings up and down the country and abroad. Like, they have gone for it. And but there was one screening we did at the Irish Heritage Centre in Ireland where I did sort of see the ghost of like Bruce Forsyth enter Lucia, because she just sort of stood up with this mic and then started working the room, and she was singing songs, and it was just so I was like, this is it sort of turned into this whole sort of cabaret. And maybe that's the next thing for them. Maybe that's what their next thing is.
Yeah. I mean, we need to be really careful not to like historicise them too much, because collectively they've forgotten more than most of us will ever know in terms of what they've done. Yeah. And yeah, it was great to have them at the premiere in Manchester for Superbia, because I mean the film was almost like dwarfed by the reality of them being there. It was like but it was great to see like loads of young lesbians there who did not know. And that's the thing, when I teach kind of activist history, a lot of it is about making that power available. So a lot of people think that activism is a thing that someone else does. They don't know that it's people just like them who have made the biggest impact, and they're very modest about their kind of heroic state. Yeah. It's very easy to put someone on a pedestal, but their very ordinariness is what makes it extraordinary. Do you know what I mean? The power of that collective and everything. I loved it.
I really liked, I just want to say I really liked seeing hearing their perspective on Manchester as a place, because to me, growing up, I always heard about the gay village, and even before like understanding myself as part of that community, I always saw Manchester as kind of a gay friendly place, and obviously never was really taught about any of the history of it, and it was sad, but it was really interesting to hear their perspectives as older women, to just hear about the things that they faced, and also the bravery, and like when they were saying they just go to pubs and like kiss each other and stuff. Like, it seems so kind of inane now, but to understand that at one point it was really provocative. Like, it's interesting.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, still is. But
I know. I was just going to say on that point actually that I had a really good sort of really in-depth chat with Lucia the other day actually about something. We were talking, and she was saying that we were talking about exactly that actually, and she was saying how it might not be obviously, you know, you've only got to look at the news, and lesbians still do face violent oppression and attacks, you know, they do, but in particular transgender men and women and non-binary people do, and it was so interesting to hear her speak about it, because she remembered in the 60s the village being populated by those people, and they're being attacked, and it's a cause of great concern of hers that it is still happening, but it's sort of increasingly so happening today, but not just on the bars and on the scene, but on things like Twitter, you know. And she was talking about a certain, you know, children's author who's come out with some very interesting, you know, horrific opinions recently, and saying how damaging they are. And so when she says at the end of the film, the fight goes, you know, carries on, it does. And it goes to your point, Greg, that they're not stuck in aspic, these two women. They are both so sharp and clever with their politics still. It's amazing.
Yeah, and it's a real like call to arms for other generations when someone has that long view of history as well. And also it's quite touching, like thinking about the David Robillard and that film side by side, of that there's a gap in that generation very often with gay men. And when those lesbian voices are still there from those same generations, it behoves us to sort of amplify them, because there is so much of that generation missing. And I love that element of that film too. I just want to talk a little bit about archive footage, and it's such a big part of these films. And like, how do you go about it? Where do you access it? And how do you find it? There's such brilliant imagery that's so evocative just even as itself. Where do you start with making a piece like that?
You've got to do a lot of digging. You've got to think out the box. You can go to the usual archive houses, but I try not to, not because I don't want to, not because it's the usual places, but because I'd rather try and support smaller places. And you've really got to do your best to contact them and find them and get get a good deal done, because I believe people should be paid for the work, basically, and even if they filmed it years and years ago, they need to be compensated. But you've just got to think quite like I said, sort of out the box, and find filmmakers from yesteryear, and even not filmmakers, do you know what I mean? Even things like public information films, or wherever, or old porn films, as a sort of
detective work in lots of ways. And Siobhan, you've got experience.
Yeah, I'm obviously passionate about archive.
Yeah.
Passionate and obviously the archives must be paid for, but a lot of filmmakers are micro like myself. I've got a film at the moment that I was hoping to show, but that need to do some work on the archive that I'll do a crowdfunder for. In fact, it's interesting because some of the archive I shared with your film. And Chris gave me this idea. So I was making a film, and Chris suggested showing porn, putting bits of porn film in it. And I said, well, I can't do that. And he said, what about just the beginnings of them? So I went to Bishopsgate and I watched, in fact, there's a stack of porn films that haven't been digitized at Bishopsgate, by the way. So I watched them, and the beginnings of, it's really interesting what you can do with just looks and stuff. I didn't end up using those because I couldn't digitize them in time. But I'm working on a feature at the moment, a documentary, and we couldn't do it if we had to pay for archive. I mean, forget it. Main reason is because that archive doesn't exist. Yeah. Because there is no archive of this is about punk women in London in the 80s. That archive doesn't exist. So we had to go to the community, and it's been the people who got council flats, and so who had cupboards where they could store stuff for years. That's where it is. Right. And it's gold, and it's gold, and it's gold, and it's beautiful. I love the texture of archive. I love, because editing is like a sort of, it's like knitting. I'm just learning to edit at the moment. So it's a bit like knitting with files, basically. Yeah. But it's 3D knitting, of course, with sound. But it's 3D knitting, and I just think the texture of archive, and you can take license with it a lot more. So, for instance, some of the archive. So I haven't introduced myself much. I'm Siobhan, I'm producer, and I have a film that's just hit Picture Lock this week, so it's very exciting. And this is Rebel Dykes. It's beautiful, beautiful. Anyway, so the archive that we've used, you can take liberties with it. So what happens when you collect archive that was filmed in a fetish club? You cannot show that stuff. But with archive, you can add a bit of, you can make it invisible. You can hide people. I adore archive. I mean, I'm a filmmaker who doesn't really know how to hold a camera, so it's also kind of handy for that, because other people have filmed it for me. Yeah. It's a beautiful, beautiful, but it's incredibly expensive. And I agree with you that people have to be paid, but also some of it's our history. one of the films I've made is used like tourist film, and you think that belongs to me as a country. It's, if my taxpayers, well, my grandma's or my great grandma's taxpayers paid for that, why can't I use it? And I'll be good with it, I promise.
I think it's extraordinary, like,
except for Ripon.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's extraordinary to think like that these films might not have a future otherwise. Do you know what I mean? Like to bring something out of the archive.
We're adding magic to them, and when your film, the bits of the archive that I can know quite well in your film is so used in a different way than it was originally made. How I've used it. I mean, it's the filmmaker who makes it. It's the remaking of it makes a new art form.
Yeah, of course.
I do love that.
That's quite a queer thing as well, and it's quite a punk thing as well, like repurposing and reframing. The collage nature of it. Like, I really love that. And we'll talk a bit about like Rebel Dykes in a minute, because it's like it's not just a film; it's a project in a community as well, isn't it? But I'd love to go to you. Christopher McGill directed Crypsis, and Siobhan, you produced it, and that film has had such an impact on me. And first of all, I just want to talk about like the incredible like central performance. Can you talk about your lead actor, because I just thought he was remarkable?
Yeah, David's brilliant. Honestly, what a find! I met him at a party actually. Got to know him through a couple of parties actually, but really lovely guy, really funny, but I don't know, there was something about him. I just saw something. There's something in his face. He's very expressive, and so when I proposed it to him, I think at first he was apprehensive, but no, in the end
he'd never acted before.
Yeah,
he'd never acted before.
Never acted before. Yeah, so he really took well to it. But I have to say, I was worried though. We'd put, me and Siobhan put on a nightclub for the filming scene, and I was really worried. All these people were here. We'd organised it all. It was all ready to go. The first shooting day was the nightclub, so we wanted to throw him in the deep end. We'd rehearsed to navigate the scene, but I just thought, what if he bottles it? What if he doesn't turn up? So, and he did. First time actor. Really big spotlight on him in that situation, and he done really, really well. So yeah, he's a lucky find actually.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful performance, and he's got that thing that you just can't teach people. It seems like the camera's not there. I mean, he just like fills the screen in those moments, and is so vulnerable. And yeah, I loved it. And where did you draw the story, like the narrative of Crypsis, from that experience?
I'd worked on a short film documentary before that. It was a time-based art documentary. That's my background. So I was working with my colleague Moya Crowley on that. And so it was just collecting lots and lots of stories, working with these asylum seekers through a participatory project for over a year. So I collected loads of stories, and some of them were really harrowing. So from that, basically, there's quite a few stories that emerged, and the one that really stood out to me, amongst others, was around the experience for gay people as asylum seekers, and the more I delved into that, the more I realised these horrible, ways that people have been treated, and the way they've been questioned, and how that has changed, but how people are still in the same situation. How do you prove your sexuality? And how do you integrate into, Western society when, these people are dealing with trauma, with internalized homophobia in a really, extreme way. So I just really wanted to kind of, as much as a short film, I really wanted to touch upon that and try and give a sense of the characters in the world with that.
Yeah, and it really does that. And what it also does, it invites inquiry, because that it's part of a much bigger experience, that story. And especially like the club scene that you were describing it's so pivotal. And the impact that had on me was when I saw that space, I was like, oh, that's my world. Like, I recognize that world. I can flourish there. I can feel safe there. And for Ayo, for Ayo, it's the opposite. So it's a challenge for him. It's an unknown, and it's like a trap almost. And for anyone with privilege in the community to hear that, to understand that what's a welcoming space for one person is a frightening space for another, is is like, it's a really important lesson, and to visualize it is like, it's just such a great, you know, it's just such a great use of film, I think.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, I felt that way with the club. I really wanted to have fun with it. And, you know, I know Siobhan's in the same state of mind with that. You know, we wanted to have fun with it and just do it as we wanted to have a club, you know, something out there, you know, the kind of club nights you see that are a bit more maybe underground or intimate. But I think, in a way, what was kind of feeling with that as well is I think even for people being introduced to the gay scene for the first time when they're younger, there is that kind of thing of it's quite scary and there's all these things you have to deal with. But I think for putting ourselves in the shoes of an asylum seeker, just how more extreme that culture shock might be.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Does anyone else want to talk about Crypsis while we're all together?
I liked what you said, about it kind of inspiring you to seek further. I definitely felt that when I watched it. I knew obviously there was some kind of context to it. I knew, and it seems like it's an institutional thing. It's not just watching it and this is one person's experience. You can feel that this is a large kind of history, and it kind of feels like a call to action in some way, and ties into what we saw with Invisible Women, where you see a problem and you feel the need to kind of rectify it. Like I saw it, I didn't have the words for it, but I could see that, you know, just the line of interrogation and questioning at the beginning was so uncomfortable. And then the way where he's there taking the photos to kind of provide this evidence felt so overwhelmed in the space, and then deletes them at the end. Like there was just so much there. It was really, really, really powerful.
Yeah, I agree absolutely with all of that. And you do a lot with a very small, I mean, like you said, the delete, it just felt like something way down the hell, but also it was also like, well, why should I? Like it was a reclamation of some kind of power for him as well, which I was very moved by. Joe, did you want to say something about Crypsis also?
Yes, I mean, I thought it was extraordinary, and I think it is extraordinary, and I think it's like you said, that interrogation scene where it's you know, I thought that was beautifully edited and handled. How to, you know, the constant barrage of questioning again and again, and it gets more intimate and more private. And you know, we're all very, you know, as you said, Greg, talking about privilege, you know, over here you would never dream of answering those questions. You'd never dream of somebody you know, intruding into your sexuality in your life like that. Whereas and you know, sexuality, we all know in our sort of theorized, you know, that sexuality can't be labeled, it can't be tied down, it can't be, but for the, you know, for the benefit of that system, of the asylum and immigration system, it has to be so boxed in and so hemmed in and so anachronistic to what it is as a lived experience. I thought it was really, again, so sort of very simply but devastatingly so done, and as well, the deleting at the end broke my heart, because I sort of took it differently to you, Greg. I didn't see it as like you know, why should I do that? I sort of thought it was like, what's the point? You know what I mean? It was heartbreaking, because here's this man who's clearly very alone and isolated, you know, trying to pass off this life and unable to do so. I thought it was I thought it was breathtaking.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
And it just struck me earlier what Sadé was saying about, you know, we don't know what we don't know about our history, and I just think what a glorious opportunity for even just this collection of films that we're talking about now. If teenagers were able to see them, you know, imagine what the impact of seeing it at 16. It would have been you know, a life-changing experience for me. And that's what I mean about where that short film is a place where queer stories just seem to really flourish. We've gone on for quite a long time, but I did want to ask you something, Siobhan, about being a producer, because people from outside the film world don't necessarily know like how a film gets made, and you've come to film producing kind of like in the last few years, and you're just like really excelling at it and turning out these beautiful pieces and supporting these amazing projects. What is that like? What does your work involve?
Well, Zoom, an awful lot of Zoom, an awful lot of working with really creative people and feeling very, very privileged. I'm one of those. I've got a few like bon mots, but one of them is like a successful director works for people who are massively more talented than them, and that's my policy. So it's great working with Chris. I mean, I've been very lucky. I'm just finishing a master's, an excellent master's in Scotland, and which we did part-time, me and Chris, and so as part of that I ended up directing a couple of films. So I learned from the people I work with. So I was very lucky to be in on the edit with Cripsus. So Cripsus has it's only got one dialogue scene, you'll note. So I learned so much about sound design by working with Chris, and Chris is the sound designer that Chris likes working with Marco. So it's a real two-way thing. Greg, you've known me a while. You might know I used to be a nurse.
Yeah, I do know that.
Yeah, to me, I see similarities. I like to be nice, to be nurturing, and to make people, this morning. So it's very exciting, as I say. At the moment, I'm sort of got a lot of balls in my hands. I think that's the thing about being a producer. But one of them is I've got a lot of fabulous short films that are all hitting the distribution now. An amazing one of Chris is a documentary that's not even hit the festivals yet, Is It Me? It's just about a bio drag queen, which is just I've got a feature that's hit Picture Lock in, maybe it's coming in now on Vimeo.
Wow.
It's so hot. This is Rebel Dykes, which has been paid for by the community. I mean, as a producer, I would look to Joseph. Joseph is what I would call a producer. Joseph's able to raise funds and everything.
Sorry, Siobhan, you are a producer. I'm sorry, you are. So don't start that.
Yeah.
I feel like so emerging compared to Joseph.
No.
Would be anyway. So it's a dead exciting time, because why the hell can we not? I mean, the world literally could end very soon, so we might as well make art.
Yeah, I'm here for that.
Nothing else to do. And Jesus, it kept me through the pandemic. A lot of us seem to be making lockdown films.
Yeah.
Thank God for creativity. I made one. Yeah, I think all of us were editing or something during.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's been the greatest thing that's happened, really. I mean, I've had great things all my life, but it's been a recently great thing was becoming a filmmaker and going to college and learning about it and
great. And I'd love people to know that it's the thing that's available to them. Like I've just made my own short film for the first time ever, and that was like a response to lockdown, and it's partly my lockdown diaries. And it seems really simple now, but I know that in 6 months and a year, it's going to be like an archive piece. And I'm just invested in it for that playful, historic reason, and that's what I was saying before about.
You're a wonderful writer, Greg. I'm glad you're getting into film.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really exciting. And everything that we have to.
When can we see it?
Very soon.
When I first
Go on, Siobhan.
Sorry, when I first got into film, because I had a story to tell, and this was the Rebel Dyke story. I started collecting all the history, so I didn't purposely go into making film. But it's just, I thought, well, I could go and do a PhD about this because I've got this great story, piece of research. But everybody loves a movie. You know what I mean? It's such a great way of reaching across generations, across filling the Yeah. So Rebel Dykes has become a whole impact, what we call it, an impact producer is really what I do a lot for Rebel Dykes. I put on I ran a film club, a cult dyke film club through the lockdown that was like Hollywood arriving because of, the time difference thing between LA and the UK is really handy. We had like Hollywood stars coming along.
Great.
And I've got an exhibition, a fund exhibition in London in spring, covered COVID, you know, as long as COVID lets us happen. And you know, we've got some strong executive producers. We've got like you know, we want to make movies.
Doing it. Well, I mean, all of your work has been really, really cherished by me, and we will always share and promote everything you do through Superbia, because we have like a dedicated following. And
I always say I learned everything I know in Manchester.
Great. I love that. What a legacy. I'm going to end it there. I just want to say thank you to Siobhan, to Christopher, to Sadé, and to Joe. And I hope everyone has had the chance to watch these films. They're going to be online for the Sunday and the Monday. So if this conversation is what you've watched first, I hope it's inspired you to go and see them. And, you know, pick up a camera, feel empowered, and like, you know, you follow that impetus to tell a story. And we'll be here to watch it. So thank you so much to all of you. Big love to you all. And
thank you, Greg. Thank you, Superbia.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Bye.